Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bhakti Fundamentals. Today we are introducing what will be the topic of discussion for our next series. And it's a topic that was actually inspired by discussions with members of our group here at Bhakti Fundamentals. Today's introductory talk includes several exercises, hopefully helpful to you, for exploring the subject of personhood. Now, this topic and our upcoming series is related to our last series. Recall how in the last few classes about the nature of the Absolute Truth, or God, we established that according to the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord is actually the Supreme Person, with whom we each have an individual, unique relationship. And as the Supreme Person, Krishna, a name meaning all attractive, is actually the source of our own personalities. He is the source of our personhood. Everything emanates from him. And if we act on our relationship with the Supreme, we learned that we will achieve complete inner fulfillment and also full spiritual happiness. And spiritual happiness is eternal. Spiritual happiness is so far beyond any temporary material happiness that we might encounter in this material world that we find ourselves in. So today, we explore what it means to be a person and the implications of that for our spiritual lives, for our relationship with the Supreme. Now, this is a very relevant topic because the central text that we study from at Bhakti Fundamentals, the Bhagavad Gita, is a conversation. It's a conversation between persons, the Supreme Person, or Krishna, and Arjuna, a jiva, or an individual soul. That's part of what makes the Gita so interesting. We're listening into someone else's interesting conversation, and the eavesdropping ends up helping us out too. That's a win-win, right? So to start us off today, I wanted us to think about what it actually means to be a person. And I urge you all to carry out this exercise on your own later, or discuss it with your friends or family members, because it's a really interesting little exercise actually. For now, however, I will show you what a little group of us at Bhakti Fundamentals came up with when we brainstormed the topic. In answer to, what does it mean to be a person? We came up with the following. It means to be conscious, to have personal or individual thoughts, to have personal characteristics and qualities, to have personal likes and dislikes, to experience emotions like joy, sorrow, anger, to have personal talents, hobbies, and goals, to be limited to our own unique experience of the world. I can't ever really have your experience or you mine, but because we're persons, we can share our experiences with one another. And of course, being a person also means to desire personal relationships and connections with others, to be able to exhibit care for others. And again, I encourage you to carry this out on your own. When you do, you can also think of this exercise in terms of being a person allows me to ... fill in the blank. We're not impersonal forces, and neither is the Supreme or God. And being persons allows us to do all of the things listed on screen and more. If you come up with more on your own time, send them along to us. We'd be interested in hearing them and continuing the conversation and adding to our own list. Now, on the surface, this seems like a very simple exercise and point to grasp, but it's an important one, and it will bring us to our next series on Bhakti Fundamentals in an interesting way. So next, I wanted us to explore how it feels when someone treats us in a personal manner, in a personal way. And for this, try to think of an interaction from this past week. How did it make you feel to be treated in a personal way? To give an example, a week back, I had a friend and mentor of mine named Divya Alter reach out to check in on how I was doing. Now, for some context, Divya is an Ayurvedic chef and successful restaurant owner in New York City, and she also practices Bhakti Yoga. Now, I was a student at her Ayurvedic cooking school 2 years back, and we've been good at keeping in touch since then. She and I immediately clicked in the context of the class, but we hadn't spoken in a while. And busy as she is running a restaurant and a cooking school, as well as serving in the local Bhakti Center in New York and writing cookbooks, she still made time to reach out to me. And I reflected after talking to her that the result of treating others in a personal manner is joy and gratitude and a feeling of wanting to reciprocate, among other positive results. This one positive interaction with Divya inspired me further in my spiritual life, and it even got me back into the kitchen cooking some Ayurvedic dishes that I had learned from her and from her cookbooks. Such is the power of kind personal interactions. So think back on your past week and try to identify a similar example if you can. For our purposes now, though, our group at Bhakti Fundamentals came up with the following. When someone treats us in a personal fashion, we feel recognized and acknowledged. We feel special, like we matter to the person. We probably feel connected to the person. We most likely feel grateful and appreciative to them. We wish to reciprocate with that person. We want to give back to the person in even greater ways. And we feel happy. It's heartwarming when someone treats us in a personal fashion. Now, on the note of personalism, you may remember this quote of the poet Maya Angelou. She said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." So now for the other side. How does it feel when someone treats us in an impersonal way, when someone ignores our personhood? Note that this question has a negative connotation, and this is because impersonal interactions just aren't fulfilling and can be hurtful. Of course, you don't have to dig into the past for memories of being treated poorly right now, but you may have an example that springs to mind, and if you do, you'll undoubtedly remember how it made you feel. We came up with the following list, and of course you may add to it in your free time. When someone treats us in an impersonal manner or overlooks our personhood, we often feel distanced from the person, cut off from them. We may feel unimportant and insignificant to the person. We may feel alienated, as if our individuality is disregarded. We may feel closed or dissatisfied in regards to the relationship or lack thereof. So now we're arriving at the heart of our discussion and actually the heart of Bhakti Yoga. Personhood and the ability to have personal relationships and connection in this world derives from the Supreme Person, or Krishna, God. Krishna is a person. He just happens to be the Supreme Person. And this means that just as we have likes and dislikes and unique qualities and characteristics and the desire for positive personal interactions, so does the Supreme Absolute Truth, so does God. Therefore, I wanted us to next explore the following question on screen. How might Krishna, or God, feel when we treat him in an impersonal manner? In other words, when we overlook his personhood and do not treat him in a personal way. In discussing this question with members of the Bhakti Fundamentals community, we concluded that when we treat him in an impersonal manner, Krishna may feel much like we do in the same situation, that we would like distance from him, that we're keeping him at arm's length or more, that we don't really care to have a personal relationship with him. Now, what are the implications of this? We may not realize this, but it's very important. If we don't want a personal relationship with the Supreme, he reciprocates with our desire to not know him personally. At the extreme, there is the case of those who don't wish to relate to or know the Supreme at all, who choose to ignore him entirely. And what happens in that case? Again, it's important for us to know. In the Gita, there's a verse that speaks to this situation, among other verses. In chapter 7, verse 25, Krishna says, "I do not manifest to those who act foolishly, and do not apply their intellect spiritually. For them I am covered by my mystical spiritual potency. Therefore, such persons do not know that I am eternal and infallible." And in the purport or explanation to this important Gita verse, Srila Prabhupada writes, "It may be argued that since Krishna was visible to everyone when he was present on this earth, how can it be said that he's not manifest to everyone?" But actually, he was not manifest to everyone. When Krishna was present, there were only a few people who could understand him to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Pandavas and a few others knew that he was the Supreme, but not everyone. He was not revealed to the non-devotees, those not interested in spiritual life. Therefore, he was manifest only to his devotees. But to others, to the non-devotees, who do not apply their intelligence spiritually, he was covered by his spiritual potency. Now remember, as the Supreme, God can do anything, but he does not remove our free will at any time. If he forced us to love him, then that would not be real love. Love must be freely given. This verse from the Gita and its corresponding purport on screen point out that the Lord reciprocates with our desire to know him or not to know him. He honors our free will. In this sense, Krishna actually puts our desire above his own. He wants all of us to personally relate to him, but he will honor our decision if we don't wish to. And thus, someone who's atheistic, for instance, may be able to cultivate a whole worldview and creation story that does not include God. And this is because Krishna does not reveal himself to such persons, precisely because they don't wish to know him or about him. Therefore, they actually see a world devoid of God, devoid of the Supreme. Whereas, on the other side, of course, are the devotees of the Lord, who perceive Krishna's presence in all aspects of this world. As this purport nicely points out, the devotees were the ones who were able to perceive the Supreme Lord when he walked this earth. They recognized him. But those who were not interested in cultivating a relationship with the Lord simply could not recognize him. In Bhakti Yoga, remember that we're attempting to yoke or connect back to the Supreme, or Krishna, through devotional service. That's actually where the word devotee comes from. It's related to the word devotion. And therefore, in Bhakti Yoga, we try to remain conscious of Krishna, of the Supreme, as we go about our daily lives, and this includes discerning his touch in the artistry of this world. In the Gita, Krishna says that he is the light of the sun and the moon, the taste of water, the fragrance of the earth, the heat and fire, the life of all that lives. He gives us this information so that we can see and feel his presence around us at all times. These are ways in which the Supreme Lord wants us to experience him in our daily lives. But there are more ways we can relate to him also, more personal ways. Beyond just a perceptual awareness of Krishna's energy, in the form of the earth and all life and natural phenomena on it, we can actually serve Krishna, the Supreme Person, and thereby act on our eternal relationship with him. Just as Krishna seeks a personal connection to us, we're meant to desire one with him as well, aspiring to not only see his influence in the world, but to actively engage in a relationship of devotional service to him. This is precisely what Bhakti Yoga facilitates our accomplishing. And accomplishing this is actually the heart of Bhakti Yoga, the aim of Bhakti Yoga, connecting to Krishna in a personal manner by rendering devotional service to him. In the Gita, we have the example of Arjuna, who is a devotee or bhakti yogi and friend of Krishna. And at the end of the Gita, Krishna reveals that he spoke the Gita to Arjuna precisely because Arjuna is his devotee and friend. Krishna states, "Because you are my very dear friend, I am speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit." How personal is this verse? Krishna is speaking a whole book's worth of instructions, the most confidential and helpful instructions of all time, in the middle of a battlefield in order to help out his dear friend who is struggling right now. It's extremely personal. Thus, in this verse, we encounter one way in which Krishna reciprocates with those who wish to serve him. He provides them with the confidential knowledge of how to reach him in the form of the Gita, but also in the form of the other bhakti scriptures, and through Guru, our teachers, and through the other practitioners on the path of Bhakti Yoga. So many ways. And in fact, the Gita also functions as Krishna's personal instructions for each and every one of us. This spiritual conversation, on which we're eavesdropping, if you will, is meant for our spiritual edification. It is our personal instruction manual as well. Now, of course, to really know and love someone, to serve them, means to personally relate to them, to personally connect with them in a meaningful way. So this brings us to our last question today, which marks the beginning of our next series on Bhakti Fundamentals. And that is, how can we treat Krishna, the Supreme Lord, in a personal manner? What are some ways that we can interact with the absolute truth or God personally in our daily lives? Remember that he's not a nebulous concept. He's not an impersonal force. He's not just love. Just as we have feelings and preferences and qualities and a personal name, so does God. So does Krishna. Therefore, how can we invite the Supreme into our lives in a very personal way? And this is one question that we will not answer today, and that's because it will be the topic of our upcoming series. And before then, I'd like all of you to come up with a list of ideas for how you might treat the Supreme personally. To get started, you might reflect back on our other questions from today. What it means to be a person, how it feels to be treated like a person, and then perhaps think about how you might treat a good friend of yours. Then simply extend it out to the Supreme. Remember, God is the Supreme Person with whom we have an eternal relationship. So this exercise is to get us thinking on how we might start activating that unique personal relationship. And with that, welcome to the heart of Bhakti Yoga. This is really the core of Bhakti, or devotional service to the Supreme. Reach out to us if you have any questions. Start brainstorming this week and send your answers on over to us. We're always enlivened by your questions and feedback and responses. We learn a lot actually in hearing from you. So that's all for now. Thank you for listening today, and we look forward to hearing from you this week and seeing you next time on Bhakti Fundamentals.